On Christmas night, the town felt unusually quiet, as if even the wind had lowered its voice out of respect for the holiday. Snow fell gently, settling like a thin white blanket over the empty sidewalks and the darkened storefronts. The last shop on the street had just closed, its metal shutter pulled down with a tired clatter. A single street lamp flickered, casting long shadows across the pavement. A small boy stood near the door, his boots too thin for the cold, his coat clearly borrowed from someone bigger. He shifted from foot to foot, holding his breath as he watched a tall man lock up the store. The man smelled faintly of coffee and paperwork, the kind of scent grown-ups carried when they were always busy. He was his mother's boss, important, serious, and usually in a hurry. The boy gathered his courage and reached out, tugging gently at the man's coat sleeve. "Sir," he whispered, his voice soft but steady, "can you tell Santa we moved?" The man turned, surprised. He expected a complaint or maybe a holiday greeting, not a question like that. He looked down into the boy's wide eyes, shining with the kind of hope that made adults uncomfortable because they weren't sure how to protect it. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. Behind the boy stood his mother. She clutched her purse tightly, knuckles pale from the cold or from something deeper. Her shoulders were tense as if she were bracing for judgment. A few cardboard boxes were stacked neatly by the door, their corners softened from use. They told a story without words, a hurried move, a smaller place, a life carefully folded into whatever would fit. The mother tried to smile, but it trembled. She wanted to apologize, to explain, to say that things hadn't gone as planned. She worried her boss would see not just an employee, but a failure, a woman who worked hard and still fell behind. The boy didn't notice her fear. To him, the world still made sense. Santa came on Christmas. Gifts arrived if Santa knew where you lived. If you moved, you simply had to tell someone. The man glanced at the boxes, then back at the boy. He felt something tighten in his chest. He realized this wasn't just a child's question, it was a small, fragile belief asking not to be broken. He cleared his throat, still unsure how to answer, while the snow continued to fall, quietly witnessing a moment that would linger far longer than Christmas night itself. The move had not been planned, at least not in the way moves were supposed to be. There were no excited conversations, no careful packing weeks in advance, no goodbyes spoken with confidence. It happened suddenly, pushed forward by numbers written in red ink and conversations whispered late at night. Rent had slowly outrun paychecks, each month gaining distance until there was no way to catch up. Warmth, once taken for granted, had been replaced by worry that settled deep in the bones. The new place was smaller and quieter, with walls that echoed and windows that let in more cold than light. It did not feel like home yet, but it was what they could afford. The mother told herself it was temporary, that things would improve if she just worked harder, saved more carefully, asked for less. She folded that hope into every box she carried. The boy, however, noticed different things. He noticed that their new room had a window where he could see the moon. He noticed that his mother still kissed his forehead before bed. And most of all, he noticed that Christmas was coming just like it always did. To him, the problem wasn't money or rent or exhaustion. It was simple and practical. Santa didn't know their new address yet. In his mind, Santa was never late and never cruel. Santa just needed directions. That belief gave him courage, the kind that only children have, pure and unafraid of embarrassment. That was why he spoke to his mother's boss so calmly, as if asking for help with a small and reasonable task. Adults' new addresses could be updated. Surely Santa could too. The boss saw something very different. He had watched the mother work extra hours without complaint, take fewer breaks, and apologize even when things weren't her fault. He had noticed the shadows under her eyes and the way she smiled quickly, as if afraid it might cost her something. Now, standing in the cold, he finally understood the weight she carried. Her smile, thin and tired, was not weakness. It was courage carefully stitched together, thread by thread, through long days and sleepless nights. It was the smile of someone protecting a child from truths too heavy to share. She had lost comfort but not dignity. She had lost space but not love. The boss felt a quiet respect grow within him. The boy saw magic. The mother carried reality. And between them stood a truth neither of them said aloud. Sometimes surviving takes more strength than succeeding, and sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is keep hope alive for someone else, even when their own feels dangerously thin. That night, the boss drove home through streets still glowing with Christmas lights. Colorful bulbs blinked from rooftops and trees, cheerful and careless, as if the world had decided that joy was mandatory for the evening. He barely noticed them. The boy's voice echoed in his mind, soft and hopeful, asking a question that had no simple answer. By the time he reached his driveway, the snow on his windshield had melted, but the weight in his chest had not. Inside his house, warmth greeted him instantly. The heater hummed, lights turned on with a switch, and the smell of pine lingered in the air. He hung up his coat and stood there longer than necessary, suddenly aware of how much he had and how rarely he thought about it. He ate dinner without tasting it and sat in his living room, staring at the tree glowing quietly in the corner. Sleep refused to come. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking of addresses, how easily they could change a life. One address meant safety, heat, and rest. Another meant uncertainty, counting coins, and choosing which worries to carry into the next day. He realized how small the distance was between the two, and how easily luck or timing decided who stood where. He thought about chances, about how many he had been given without asking and how many others never received at all. Success, he realized, often arrived disguised as opportunity given at the right moment, and sometimes all it took was one person deciding to open a door instead of closing it. It struck him how easy it was to be generous once a year. Anyone could donate a toy, write a check, or offer kind words during the holidays. It felt good, required little thought, and asked for nothing beyond the moment. But kindness on purpose, real kindness, was different. It demanded attention, effort, and the willingness to be involved after the decorations came down. He turned onto his side, the boy's question rising again in his thoughts. "Can you tell Santa we moved?" It wasn't really about Santa, he knew that now. It was about being seen, about someone noticing a struggle and deciding it mattered. Before morning came, the boss made a choice. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It didn't come with applause or gratitude. It came quietly with resolve. He decided that kindness would not be seasonal this time. It would be intentional. As the house slept around him, he finally closed his eyes, knowing that by dawn he would act, not as a boss, not as a giver of charity, but as a human being choosing to make a difference where he could. Morning arrived quietly, wrapped in pale winter light. The sky was still soft with fatting stars when a gentle knock sounded at the door of the small apartment. The mother stirred first, waking with the familiar ache of worry before her feet even touched the floor. For a brief moment, fear crossed her mind. No one ever knocked early with good news. She pulled her sweater tighter around herself and walked toward the door, careful not to wake her son. When she opened it, she froze. Standing there was her boss, his coat dusted with snow, his expression calm but determined. In his gloved hand was a small set of keys that caught the morning light. For a second, words failed her. She could only stare, unsure if exhaustion had turned into imagination. He spoke gently, explaining that he had found a better place, warm, closer to work, and affordable. He told her about steadier hours, a small raise, and the chance to breathe without counting every step. He didn't speak like a hero or a savior. He spoke like someone who had finally listened. Tears filled her eyes, but this time they were not from shame or fear. They were heavy with relief. She tried to thank him, to explain how much it meant, but her voice broke before the words could form. He simply nodded as if to say that gratitude wasn't necessary. The sound of voices drew the boy from his bed. He padded down the hallway, rubbing sleep from his eyes. When he saw his boss standing there, he stopped, confused, until his gaze fell on the keys. His face lit up instantly. The boy smiled wide, the kind of smile that came from absolute certainty. "See, Mom," he said proudly, tugging at her sleeve. "Santa always knows where to go." The mother laughed through her tears and pulled her son close, holding him tightly. For the first time in a long while, her shoulders relaxed. The future was still uncertain, but it no longer felt impossible. As the door closed and the morning continued, the apartment seemed warmer somehow. Not because of heat, but because hope had finally found its way in. And though Santa had not come in a sleigh, his presence lingered, in kindness chosen, in courage rewarded, and in the quiet miracle of someone deciding to knock.